Alrighty, hello folks, and good morning. Welcome to another edition of Know Your Unit. Today we discuss the White Knight, the Zoomy, more like a berserker than a knight, but hey, it is what it is. So, given that I'm now 4 Gilduses deep into losing that guy over and over again, the only White Knight we have to talk about today is going to be Murden. But let's talk about the knight in question. What is the deal with this class? I mean, in most cases, folks will get a hold of these guys in Chapter 3 and just happily let them curb stomp a lot of their problems away. The thing is, they come in with a decent stat advantage, and they come in with their weapon skills maxed out and all that, but the thing is, they're actually not really a knight, so to speak. Like, they carry the title, but there's nothing defensive about these guys. They're effectively more of an upgraded berserker than an actual knight. So let's get into their skills here. Weapon-wise, they have access to fists, axes, hammers, spears, swords, and two-handers, along with crossbows and cudgels. Between all of these, fists are going to be really solid for addressing some of their range limitations. Swords are generally going to be pretty solid defensively. Two-handers are kind of similar to fists this time around on account of Cyclone Saber, but they do miss out on some of that elemental coverage at longer range. Axes are going to, as always, be really solid as far as stuff like Infinity goes, so just generally a good coverage move. Actually, axes and hammers, there's not many classes that can actually afford to run both axe and hammer, and while there is still a little bit of overlap there, I generally find the combination works pretty decently. However, you can actually do some tricky weirdness with these guys. For example, if you decided that you wanted to simply utilize their velocity shift ability, which allows you to reduce the recovery time of units by 35, you actually may potentially get a decent bit of mileage out of using cudgels and crossbows. So, as much as these seem like weird gimmick options, in the case of crossbows, their stats are already pretty darn high, so when it comes to the finishers, stuff like Death Whale has a pretty good shot of one-shotting a lot of things with any kind of defense break whatsoever. So that's potentially a really solid hitting option, and additionally, as far as cudgels go, although they don't exactly get the healing multipliers of something like a cleric, and they only have access to, the standard knight spells, the White Knight is going to be one of the faster classes in the game, so if you're going for lightweight equipment, along with high range and the ability to speed boost stuff around them, they sort of become a more automated support cleric in a way. Being able to use essentially shittier heals, but more or less a free speed boost to consistently just run around doing little tap heals here and there while supporting the rest of the team. It's not exactly their most ideal use case or anything, I just thought it was kind of neat. However, that being said, they are also pretty much limited to two-handed maces for the most part as far as getting that range boost, unless you get the Sagara, at which point that ends up increasing significantly. Now, do you necessarily want to go use one of the best potential casting tools in the game on a guy that's going to be, doing unboosted heals? I mean, dumber things have happened. You do you. You do what makes the game fun for you, yeah? So, in some ways, like, for example, say you needed, like, the use case that I had for this was that I was doing some San Bronza, and I wanted to have essentially a cleric doing tap heals without actually having a cleric on that particular map. It's that one that's like the big square bridge area in San Bronza. And so I wanted to essentially have an automated healer that would be able to keep everybody supported. So in this particular case, this actually ended up being a pretty solid use case for stuff like this, since if you end up going for some lighter weight equipment and whatnot, you generally can get his recovery time down to about 100. It's not exactly, the best thing in the world, but you can get it pretty decent. It is a hell of a lot of investment for a lot of very kind of expensive gear and what have you, like, at least expensive effort-wise. But it will do the job. Again, not ideal, but it did suit that particular purpose. Normally, this is something they'd use the Lord for, but it is an oddly specific use case. The weapon stuff, I'm assuming most folks kind of understand at this point. You use whatever weapon type you need to cover the coverage that you need. Pincer attacks are really solid in their hands on account of their just higher stats when they're coming in, so they get more out of those pincers. Especially if you're running things like a lot of late-game weapons, like if we go for some of the fancier swords there, they're going to have their counter 4, that is going to give us a pretty significant bonus to their damage there, giving them their full 100%. So just something to potentially consider. Additionally, if we were to go over here, they do have stuff like Sanctuary, as well as Sanctuary Shadows and Rampart Shadows. again, if you're looking for that support thing, there is technically a use case to be argued. If you were to, let's say, go for something like a velocity shift, a guardian force, and then go for shadows. Like, let's say in this particular case, we wanted to just do ramparts for the sake of simplicity. So we put a rampart, and then we put the shadow on there. The main use case for something like this would just be somebody that's able to still do the whole support heal, but effectively just spend all of their points on going and denying areas. So, actually, this probably would be a better use case for the Sagara type of build in this case, as basically everything would be. I know I'm leaning a lot on the Cudgels this time around. I just thought that this was a kind of a neat use case and all that. Anyway, so in this particular case, comes with the spell charge. Essentially, you combine that in with with the ability to put down shadows and whatnot. So if you needed to very quickly both have a speed support as well as a support wall, you know, potentially it's a turbo healing golem at that point. But that being said, there's actually a funnier use case for all of this stuff. In the case of, like, let's say something like we give him a sword, we still give him that cigar there, and then we just basically have him using this to get free finishers whenever he wants to. So that's also a potential fun option as well. Actually, one of the interesting things about going for a Sagara build in his case, given that they're very kind of offensively structured stat-wise, they actually can get really solid returns just sort of charging their own finishers for the Cudgel hits themselves. That's why this guy was as he is to begin with. So, just something that's kind of neat there, as it were. So if you did want to go for, you know, the tanky insta-kill bonker kind of situation, then yeah, they're certainly there to provide that for you. The Cudgel finishers, like the Cudgel the Cudgel itself kind of sucks damage-wise, but if you were to use the finishers, those obviously will not have that negative 90% scaling penalty thing that the regular Cudgel swing has, which means that he can get full use of his stats and all that, and generally just kind of bonk stuff pretty hard. He doesn't have all of them unlocked, but stuff like Trinity Pulse is actually pretty threatening. Why you'd use this over Death Whale, I mean, outside of the charging bonus, I'm not sure, but it's still something that you can technically do. Anyway, so as far as the rest of their skills go, they've got their usual Constitution, Insight, all of that. They've got their Steadfast, because of course they do. Sanctuary, because of course they do. They've also got Recruit, if you want to go and have them go chatting people up. And then they also have Paralysis Blade. This is probably going to be one of their more notable offensive moves, especially if running something like a counter. In fact, this is probably why as soon as you get the Lombardia, you probably should give it to one of these guys. Because they can essentially stay defensive while also going and applying stun pretty much constantly. They're one of the... well, I say one of. They're essentially one of... actually, yeah, I guess they would be unique in this. They're a unique case of a unit that's able to consistently turn every weapon into a stun weapon. So if you wanted to, for example, say have them running around with a... something like a Zweihander, or in their case, since they're actually more of a heavy hitter, something like a Claymore, you can actually have them running Breach Stun as a combination that hits on every attack. So that actually can be pretty darn threatening. So status weapons are very highly recommended on these guys. They won't guarantee that secondary status on the weapon itself, but just the fact that it's a combination of stun plus something else gives them incredibly good returns for anything counterattack related. So definitely should consider that. They don't have short bows, so pretty much should stick with weapons like this. I will say though, if for example you're going for something like, let's say, something like a Scorpion Paralysis Blade, just something to bear in mind is that you want to make sure not to have them anywhere nearby the rest of your people most of the time, because yeah, they will. They will inevitably end up hitting your own people with those status debuffs. That is a whole lot of statuses going out. This particular setup, originally I was thinking would be incredibly handy for an AI team. They kept repeatedly poisoning and stunning themselves. Paralysis Blade is definitely one of those you want to have it on a single target kind of weapon deals. But yeah, just something to consider. So yeah, that's kind of about that. I mean, I'm pretty sure most folks are familiar with how Velocity Shift works at this point. Just basically speeds up everything around them. So it's just something to always have on hand. If you happen to have something like a fairy on your team, this actually can be combined with the free turn that a fairy can give to create a perpetual motion kind of circle, where if you have 2 or 3 white knights essentially standing next to this fairy goes and smooches somebody, they go ahead and get their speed bonuses. Those speed bonuses trigger the other person to act, who then triggers their speed bonuses, who then triggers the fairy to act again, who then restarts the entire cycle. And it's incredibly tedious to do it that way, but you can basically get infinite actions doing this, eventually. So, that's a fun little cycle. Lastly, there's 3 characters that can become White Knights. You have your Murden and your Gildas, but you also have Ravnus that's able to become one, so if you didn't know that, yes, Ravnus can also become the 3rd White Knight there, if you want to have them in a nice spinning triangle type of situation. Nobody else gets access to that one. Even Mr. Dude Guy down here does not get access to. Oh yeah, I guess there was a new Gildas I picked up at some point. Totally forgot. Anyway. So this one apparently lived. Is Ravnus dead again? Ravnus is apparently dead again. But this one does not get access to the White Knight is what I was trying to get at. Anyway, so that's about that. That is the kind of overall ramble as far as stuff like the White Knight goes. Generally, they're the speedy, zoomy guy. And while they do have Guardian Force, that is basically the only knight ability that they actually get to call themselves a knight. Which is ironic, because, like, it feels like every other cutscene they're going around asking if somebody can dare call themselves a knight. I don't know, can you? You don't have phalanx? What kind of shitty knight is this? But anyways, no, they're pretty solid units. Good stat advantages. That speed bonus is fantastic. Basically, it removes about a third or more of your the turn cost of the units nearby. For those that are not used to staring at the RT counter. Anyway, that's about that. Y'all have yourselves a good one, and I'll see you in the next one.